So picture this. You are standing in a crowded room. Maybe it's like a networking event or, I don't know, a crucial meeting with some international colleagues.
Right, or even just a bustling coffee shop in a city you just moved to.
Exactly. And you have a thought, like a really good, sharp, intelligent thought. You make eye contact, you open your mouth to speak, and suddenly, boom, the exact physical sensation of your mind going entirely blank just washes over you.
Oh, yeah, that is the worst feeling.
It really is. Your heart rate violently accelerates against your ribs. I
Yeah.
mean, your breathing gets shallow. You're about to speak in a language you're still learning, and this terrifying absolute certainty takes hold. You just know you are going to make a humiliating mistake.
Right, and it's an incredibly visceral reaction. I mean, your body is physically preparing for a threat.
Wait, really? Like a
Yeah.
physical threat?
Yes, absolutely. It's dumping cortisol and adrenaline into your bloodstream. And all over, nothing more than, a misplaced verb or a forgotten noun. It's this sudden, intense vulnerability where a fully capable adult feels, well, completely publicly exposed.
Exposed is exactly the word.
Yeah.
Because in that split second, it doesn't feel like you're just forgetting a piece of vocabulary.
No, not at all.
It feels as though your entire intellectual capacity is being broadcast as inadequate. Like your whole identity feels up for debate just because you can't remember the correct preposition.
Which points to how deeply intertwined language and identity actually are.
Right.
We navigate the world, we build relationships, and establish our social standing through our ability to articulate our thoughts. So when we are suddenly stripped of that fluency, we don't just feel like we're missing words, we feel like we're missing a fundamental piece of
We
ourselves.
feel lesser.
Exactly, we feel lesser.
And that terrifying sensation of losing yourself in translation is, well, it's our sole focus for today's deep dive.
It's a great topic.
It really is. We are looking at a highly regarded conversational guide and audio series. It's titled The Art of Speaking English with Confidence. And it's built around the practical and, honestly, the psychological insights of two creators, Aman and Ria.
Right, they've spent an enormous amount of time dissecting the exact terror we just described.
They really have. And what's so fascinating to me?
Well, what makes their approach worth analyzing is that they completely bypass the traditional academic mechanics of language learning.
Yes. No grammar drills.
Right. They don't offer a curriculum of verb conjugations or syntax rules. They treat language anxiety as a psychological barrier first and a linguistic barrier second.
Which is such a relief, honestly. Their core argument is that linguistic confidence has to be engineered from the inside out. So today, we are going to examine the cognitive, physiological, and emotional mechanics of the advice they provide.
Because the truth is, the architecture of learning to speak a new language confidently is, it's the exact same architecture required to master almost any deeply intimidating, vulnerable skill in life.
That is so true. Whether you're trying to speak English or deliver a keynote address or, I don't know, step onto a dance floor for the first time.
Right. The biological and psychological hurdles are remarkably consistent. And Aman and Ria start by dismantling the single biggest misconception that paralyzes learners right out of the gate.
The perfection trap.
Exactly. The idea that confidence is a byproduct of perfection.
Ria states it outright in the material. She
Mhm.
defines confidence not as the absence of errors, but as the active belief in yourself.
Right. The willingness to speak regardless of the inevitable mistakes.
Yeah, and Am reinforces this by pointing out something we all forget. Highly fluent, native speakers make grammatical errors constantly.
All the time.
So the true villain of this story isn't a limited vocabulary. It's the overwhelming, paralyzing fear of being judged, scrutinized, or laughed at.
And we have to look closely at the psychology of the adult ego to understand why this fear of judgment is so profound.
Okay, let's unpack that. The adult ego.
Yeah, think about the internal reality of a fully grown adult learning a second language. In their native tongue, they are a deeply complex, nuanced human being. They know how to wield sarcasm, they can express deep empathy, they can argue complex professional strategies, they possess a high degree of perceived intellectual and social status.
They are essentially the chief executive of their own mind. They
Yeah.
command their native language effortlessly.
Exactly. And then they step into the arena of a new language. Instantly, they experience a massive, precipitous drop in their ability to project that status.
It's like falling off a cliff.
It really is. The internal reality remains highly sophisticated. They have these intricate adult concepts floating in their mind, but the only tools available to express them belong to the vocabulary of a toddler.
Oh, that is such a painful way to put it. But it's true. The thought is, I believe the current market trends indicate a structural deficit, but the mouth says the money is bad now.
Right, exactly. And that intense friction between the complexity of the mind and the simplicity of the mouth triggers a massive ego defense mechanism.
Interesting. So the ego steps in to protect us.
Yes. The adult ego fundamentally rejects the prospect of looking foolish or incompetent. It views that linguistic stumbling not as a natural part of the learning curve, but as an existential threat.
A threat to your social standing.
And your professional competence, it registers as actual danger. And when the ego senses that kind of social danger, its primary defensive strategy is to shut the system down. It tells you to simply stay silent.
Because silence feels infinitely safer than opening your mouth and proving you don't know the words.
Precisely. If you do not speak, nobody can confirm your lack of fluency.
Yeah.
You preserve the illusion of competence by removing yourself from the interaction entirely.
I see this exact same dynamic when people try to learn how to ride a bike as adults.
I don't know, that's a good analogy.
It's notoriously difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Not because adults lack the physical coordination, but because they refuse to look ridiculous.
Right, they don't want to wobble.
Exactly. If you tell yourself you are not going to put your feet on those pedals until you have perfectly mentally calculated the physics of gyroscopic motion and balance, you will never leave the driveway.
You'll just stand there forever.
Right. You have to be willing to get on the seat, wobble erratically, look totally uncoordinated to everyone on the street, and inevitably scrape your knees. In language learning, scraping your knees is just making a public vocabulary mistake.
And it is the only known mechanism for building the necessary muscle memory. The brain requires the feedback of the error to adjust and learn.
Which raises a really interesting dilemma about how we are taught languages in school.
How so?
Well, we developed this obsession with perfect grammar. We are conditioned to believe we must mentally construct a flawlessly engineered sentence before we are allowed to vocalize it. I wonder if this academic conditioning is actually the single biggest roadblock to human connection.
I would argue it is arguably the most destructive habit a learner can carry into the real world.
Really, the most destructive.
Without a doubt. Perfect grammar is an academic metric designed to be graded on paper. Effective communication, however, is a social metric designed to facilitate human connection.
Right, those are two very different things.
Completely different. Aman and Ria point out a reality that academics often ignore, which is that native speakers butcher their own grammar relentlessly.
Oh, for sure. We dangle modifiers, we end sentences with prepositions.
We use the wrong tense. But because we speak with intent, flow, and emotion, the listener barely registers the errors.
That's so true.
When a language learner becomes fixated on perfect grammar, they are fundamentally prioritizing their own fear of making an error over the actual human desire to connect with the person in front of them.
It's like they're trying to pass an invisible oral exam rather than actually participating in a shared moment.
And that perfectionism creates a devastating cognitive bottleneck.
A bottleneck.
Yeah, if your brain is intensely scanning every single word you want to say, running it through a strict grammatical checklist before granting permission to your vocal cords, you cannot possibly keep up with the natural rhythm of human speech.
It'd be so slow.
The conversation will move on, and you will perpetually be 3 beats behind, trapped in your own head.
Wow. So if the ego is trying to protect us by demanding this impossible perfection, it creates a fascinating physical manifestation when we finally force ourselves into a conversation. Aman and Ria highlight a trap that almost every single learner falls into.
The trap of speed.
Yes, rushing. The desperate urge to get the words out as fast as physically possible.
Aman notes that learners naturally try to speak at top speed, and Ria points out that this directly fuels the feeling of nervousness.
And their counterintuitive advice is to speak deliberately, slowly, and clearly. And Aman makes a point that completely flips the script. He argues that speaking slowly actually makes you sound substantially more confident.
This touches on a deeply ingrained psychological trap that linguists often refer to as the fluency illusion.
The assumption that moving your mouth faster equals being better at the language.
Subconsciously, yes. Learners consume media, movies, podcasts, news broadcasts, and they hear native speakers rattling off complex sentences at breakneck speed.
Right.
The brain creates a false equivalence. It thinks native speakers speak fast. Therefore, to sound like I know what I am doing, I must also speak fast.
It's the equivalent of a beginner sitting down at a piano and just mashing the keys as quickly as possible, thinking the speed itself will somehow magically create a Mozart sonata.
That's exactly it. And the underlying mechanics of the brain completely prohibit that kind of forced speed.
Because it's too much to process.
Precisely. Speaking a second language requires a massive mobilization of cognitive resources. Your brain is simultaneously trying to retrieve the correct vocabulary word from a vast mental filing cabinet, apply abstract syntactical rules to format that word, and coordinate the complex physical motor movements of the jaw, tongue, and vocal cords to pronounce it.
That is a lot happening at once.
It is. When you attempt to artificially accelerate that process, you induce an immediate state of cognitive overload. The brain physically cannot retrieve and format the vocabulary fast enough to keep pace with the speed at which you are forcing your mouth to move.
So the system crashes.
Exactly. The brain hits a processing limit, the mouth runs out of words, and that is exactly where the long, agonizing ums, ahs, and sudden silences come from.
It's a complete breakdown of the cognitive supply chain. And the moment that crash happens, panic sets in. The heart rate spikes even further. Cortisol floods the system, and whatever vocabulary you did have access to just vanishes completely.
Right. By intentionally slowing down your rate of speech, you are simply giving your brain the crucial milliseconds it desperately needs to locate, process, and retrieve the next piece of information.
Thinking about this visually, it's kind of like the difference between a runaway freight train and a massive luxury cruise ship.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, like a runaway train is moving incredibly fast, but it is terrifying. Sparks are flying, it's vibrating out of control, and you know it's seconds away from derailing. There is zero confidence there, just pure kinetic panic.
Very true.
But a luxury cruise ship moves deliberately. It's slow, it's steady, but it commands the entirety of the water around it. It has absolute authority precisely because it refuses to be rushed.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the sociolinguistic layer of Alman's advice. Beyond just giving your brain time to process, slowing down fundamentally alters how the listener perceives your social status.
Wait, my social status?
Yes. In the grander scheme of human interaction, pausing, enduring silence, and speaking deliberately are deeply subconscious indicators of high status, authority, and self-worth.
That feels incredibly counterintuitive when you are the one struggling. Because when I'm the one searching for a word, the silence feels like a glaring spotlight of my own incompetence. It feels like I'm wasting the listener's valuable time.
That feeling is rooted in a low-status mindset. Observe how people communicate when they feel nervous, submissive, or overly eager to please an authority figure. They tend to rush their words. They speak quickly because they are subconsciously trying to take up as little time and physical space as possible.
Right, like I know my presence is an inconvenience, so I will get this over with as fast as I can.
Exactly. Conversely, observe a confident leader. They take their time. They are completely comfortable letting silence hang in the air. Their internal narrative is, what I am about to say is valuable, and I trust that you will wait to hear it.
Wow. So when we rush through a broken English sentence, we aren't just making grammatical errors. We are actively broadcasting to the listener that we feel inferior and apologetic for speaking at all.
Exactly. You are signaling panic. But when you consciously force yourself to slow down and allow for pauses, you completely reframe the interaction.
How so?
If you pause to search for a word, but you hold your ground and maintain a calm demeanor, the listener does not think, this person is terrible at this language. The listener's subconscious registers the deliberate pacing and thinks, this person is carefully considering their thoughts. They are thoughtful.
You are effectively weaponizing the pause.
Yeah.
You are taking the exact moment that used to cause you the most terror, the empty silence where you don't know the word, and using it to project authority.
It shifts the entire dynamic from a frantic apology to a measured exchange.
Man, slowing down the physical movement of the mouth makes perfect sense. But that only solves half the problem. What happens when your mouth is moving at the steady pace of that cruise ship, but your internal monologue is still acting like the runaway train?
Right.
Because Aman and Ria point out another massive invisible hurdle that happens entirely inside the mind. The instinct to translate.
The cognitive bottleneck of mental translation is arguably the most exhausting part of acquiring a new language.
Ria addresses this directly. She notes that learners create an immense amount of unnecessary internal pressure by translating every single thought from their native language into English before they allow themselves to speak.
It's so common.
Yeah, and her advice is to bypass that entirely and think directly in English, beginning with incredibly small, basic statements. Things like, I am feeling happy today, or I want to improve.
Transitioning away from translation is an essential threshold. Until you cross it, you will constantly feel drained by conversation. We need to look at the immense cognitive tax of a phenomenon we can call double processing.
Double processing, so running two languages at the exact same time.
Essentially, yes. When you rely on real-time translation, you are forcing your brain to run two entirely separate linguistic operating systems simultaneously for a single interaction.
Oh, wow. That sounds exhausting.
It is. I mean, imagine someone asks you a question in English. First, your brain has to receive and decode the English sounds.
Okay, step one.
Right. Then second, it has to translate those English concepts into your native language so your internal monologue can comprehend the meaning.
Right, so your brain gets it.
Exactly. Third, you have to formulate your response in your native language.
Okay.
Fourth, you have to translate that newly formulated native response back into English vocabulary.
Jeez.
And only then, fifth, do you finally speak.
It is utterly exhausting just to map out the steps. You are taking a convoluted 5-step journey to accomplish a single task. No wonder people say speaking a new language gives them physical headaches.
The mental fatigue is very real. You are burning through your working memory capacity at an unsustainable rate. Ria's advice to force the brain to start with tiny foundational thoughts directly in English is the only way to dismantle that 5-step process.
So skipping the translation.
Right. By thinking I am happy directly in English, you are bypassing the native language operating system completely. You are forging a direct neural pathway between the abstract concept of emotion and the English vocabulary, starving the translation reflex of the energy it needs to survive.
You know, it reminds me of the mental gymnastics you go through when traveling in a foreign country with a different currency.
Oh, that's a perfect comparison.
Right. When you first arrive, you use a mental exchange rate for every single interaction. You pick up a sandwich at a bakery, you see it costs €5, and your brain immediately stops and calculates, okay, wait, multiply that. Well, what is that in my home currency? Am I overpaying for this?
Yes, and it's exhausting to constantly translate the value.
Exactly. But if you stay in that country long enough, you eventually just accept the local currency as reality. A €5 sandwich is just a €5 sandwich. You stop referencing your home currency entirely.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. You are learning to transact the business of your thoughts directly in the new currency, without the middleman of the exchange rate.
But the reality of actually doing that feels incredibly daunting. It sounds great on paper to just think in English. But your internal monologue, the voice inside your head that narrates your life, judges your decisions, and processes your emotions, that voice is profoundly rooted in your native tongue.
It's the voice of your soul.
Yeah. You can't just politely ask it to start speaking a foreign language.
No, you cannot flip a switch and suddenly debate the nuances of existential philosophy with yourself in a new language. That is precisely why Ria emphasizes starting with simple, almost overly basic sentences.
Just the basics.
Yes. You do not start by changing how you process deep emotions. You start by changing how you narrate your immediate physical reality. You are standing in your kitchen, you pick up a mug, and you force your internal voice to say, "The coffee is hot. I am holding the cup."
Which, going back to our earlier point, makes you feel like an incredibly boring, simplistic version of yourself.
It does. It triggers that exact same ego defense we talked about. Your native language brain wants to weave a poetic narrative about the aroma of the morning roast, but you are forcing it to say, "Cup is hot."
Right.
You have to willingly accept being a simpler version of your internal self for a temporary period. You are laying foundational bricks. You are forcing your brain to associate the raw, physical sensation of heat directly with the English word hot, entirely bypassing whatever your native word for heat is.
And over time.
As you diligently build those tiny, direct connections over time, the complex translation habit slowly atrophies from lack of use.
So, we are intentionally slowing down the physical cadence of our speech. We are actively simplifying our internal monologue to starve the translation reflex. But all of this is still highly cerebral. It's all happening inside the brain or the vocal cords.
True.
Aman and Ria take a sharp turn here and remind the listener that human communication is not just a disembodied intellectual exercise. It is a profoundly physical act.
It is entirely grounded in our biology.
Aman states very clearly that confidence is not solely about the words you choose. And Ria immediately follows up by emphasizing the critical importance of body language. They provide a highly specific checklist for the physical body. Maintain steady eye contact, monitor your sitting posture, And above all, smile while you speak.
The smile is huge.
Yeah, Ria specifically notes that a smile automatically projects a confident and friendly aura.
This introduces the fascinating intersection of evolutionary biology and communication. What is truly remarkable here is that nonverbal physical communication frequently possesses the power to completely override verbal and grammatical deficits.
Wait, are you suggesting that the physical angle of my shoulders or the expression on my face matters more to the listener than whether I correctly conjugated a past tense verb?
In the initial moments of any interaction, absolutely.
Really?
Yes, hundreds of thousands of years before human beings developed complex syntax, grammatical structures, or vast vocabularies, we communicated our intentions, safety, threat, dominance, submission, entirely through body language.
Okay, that makes sense.
Our central nervous systems are biologically hardwired to scan for and interpret physical cues of safety long before the cognitive centers of the brain begin to parse the grammar of a spoken sentence.
So we are evolutionary creatures scanning the environment for friend or foe before we ever bother to scan a sentence for a dangling modifier.
Precisely. When you are internally panicking about your English, your physical body instinctively reacts to that stress. Your shoulders roll inward, trying to make yourself a smaller target.
Right, closing off.
Your eyes dart away to avoid the gaze of the perceived judge. Your facial muscles tense up. Without you realizing it, this defensive physical posture sends an immediate, alarming signal to the primitive brain of the person listening to you. It broadcasts tension, discomfort, and evasion.
Which instantly makes the listener feel uncomfortable, even if they don't consciously know why. They just feel a weird vibe.
Yes, they absorb your physical anxiety. However, if you actively deploy Amon and Ria's checklist, if you pull your shoulders back into a confident posture, hold steady eye contact, and offer a genuine, relaxed smile, you are broadcasting the ultimate biological signal for safety.
You're disarming them.
Exactly. You are communicating to the listener's nervous system, I am not a threat, and this interaction is positive. When a listener feels biologically safe and warmly disposed toward you, their cognitive empathy skyrockets.
Oh, wow.
They become incredibly forgiving of missing vocabulary or broken grammar because the emotional human connection has already been successfully secured.
It is genuinely wild to realize that the physical way you occupy a chair can literally alter how your adjectives are perceived by the human sitting across from you.
It really is.
If you're smiling and physically open, your broken, hesitant sentence comes across as charming and authentic. But if you are slouched over, breaking eye contact and looking terrified, that exact same broken sentence is perceived as awkward, painful, and deeply uncomfortable for everyone involved.
That is the inescapable reality of human neurobiology. The body speaks before the mouth does.
But this brings up a major psychological friction point for me.
What's that?
Well, if you are churning with terror on the inside, your heart is pounding, and you feel entirely out of your depth.
Yeah.
Can consciously faking this physical checklist actually do anything? Like forcing the corners of your mouth up into a smile, rigidly pulling your shoulders back? Can that actually trick your own internal nervous system into calming down? Or are you just wearing a very exhausting physical mask for the benefit of the audience?
You are tapping into a major field of psychological research, often referred to as embodied cognition, and more specifically, the facial feedback hypothesis.
Okay, what does the science say?
The science firmly indicates that it is not just a mask for the external world, it is a powerful biofeedback loop directed inward at your own brain.
Explain the mechanics of that loop. How does a forced smile change the brain?
We traditionally view the brain-body connection as a one-way street, right? You feel an emotion, like confidence or happiness, and your brain sends a signal down to your body, instructing your shoulders to relax and your zygomatic major muscles to pull your mouth into a smile.
Right, emotion first, then physical reaction.
Exactly. But neurological pathways run in both directions. If you deliberately adopt a tall, expansive posture, and you actively engage the specific muscles required for a smile, the sensory receptors in your physical body send immediate signals back up the vagus nerve to the brain.
The body is reporting its physical state back to headquarters.
Yes. The signals arrive at the brain and essentially say, we are currently adopting the physical posture associated with safety, dominance, and joy. Therefore, the external environment must be safe, and we must be experiencing joy.
That's crazy.
And in response to this physical data, the brain begins to alter its chemical output. It can literally reduce the secretion of cortisol, the stress hormone, and increase the release of endorphins.
So the old cliche, fake it till you make it, is not just generic motivational advice. It is a legitimate, scientifically backed neurological strategy for emotional regulation.
It is the deliberate manipulation of your own biochemistry. By adopting the physical shell of confidence, you are terraforming the chemical environment inside your brain, creating the exact conditions where genuine organic confidence can finally begin to take root.
It is fascinating to realize how much control we actually have in those moments of panic. You slow the cadence, you drop the mental translation, you fix the posture, you force the smile. It is an incredible toolkit for the exact moment you are standing in front of someone.
It's very powerful.
But language learning is not a series of isolated moments. It's a grinding, years-long marathon. How do we build the psychological and neurological stamina to maintain this?
That requires stepping away from the immediate conversation and looking at the daily lifestyle of the learner. This is where Aman and Ria address the dual concepts of microhabits and the profound danger of comparison.
They are very firm on this point. Ria issues a direct warning against comparing your progress to others, emphasizing that every single human brain acquires language at a different velocity. She argues that the only viable metric is your own personal progress.
Right.
And Aman provides the mechanism for that progress, which is daily practice. He states that dedicating just 10 minutes a day to speaking practice yields massive results. Ria suggests utilizing that time by talking to yourselves, talking with trusted friends, or even speaking directly to your own reflection in a mirror.
The warning against comparison is crucial because it directly feeds the ego defense we discussed at the beginning. When a beginner constantly measures their hesitant, broken English against the effortless flow of a native speaker, or even against a peer who is slightly more advanced, they are committing a massive cognitive error.
How so?
They are comparing the messy foundational work of their Chapter 1 against the polished, heavily edited reality of someone else's Chapter 20.
And Chapter 20 always looks incredibly smooth and effortless from the outside. You don't see the years of stumbling that went into it.
Exactly. And because you do not see the struggle, the comparison breeds immediate despair. It reinforces the false narrative that you are uniquely terrible at this, which only heightens the fear of judgment.
That makes sense. So how do we neutralize that despair?
To neutralize it, Aman and Ria prescribe low-stakes, highly controlled microhabits. 10 minutes a day. And the specific suggestion to practice speaking to a mirror is, from a neurobiological perspective, absolutely brilliant.
I have to be honest, the idea of locking yourself in a bathroom and having a 10-minute conversation with your own reflection feels inherently ridiculous. It feels crazy.
It undoubtedly feels silly to the conscious mind. But analyze what is actually happening beneath the surface. We establish that the single greatest obstacle to speaking is not a lack of vocabulary, but the paralyzing fear of social judgment.
Right.
When you stand in an empty room and speak to a mirror, you have completely eliminated the social threat vector. There is no external human being present to judge your grammar, mock your accent, or witness your struggle.
You have removed the audience. The only person evaluating you is you.
Exactly. And by removing the audience, you effectively sedate the amygdala, the fear center of the brain.
Oh, because there's no danger.
Right. Because the amygdala is not screaming about the impending danger of social ruin, your brain is free to dedicate 100% of its resources to practicing the physical motor skill mechanics of the language. You are training the muscles of your mouth to form unfamiliar vowels, you are training your tongue to hit new consonants, and you are allowing your ears to hear your own voice producing these alien sounds.
It is the exact same principle as a professional boxer shadow boxing in an empty gym.
That's a perfect analogy.
You would never tell a fighter to just read a book about throwing a punch and then immediately step into the ring for a live title fight.
No, they get destroyed.
Exactly. They stand in front of the mirror in the absolute safety of the gym, and they throw that exact same jab 10,000 times. They're ingraining the physical movement and building the neural pathways without the immediate, terrifying threat of someone punching them in the face.
Linguistic shadowboxing is the perfect way to describe it. You are forging the necessary muscle memory in a sterile, threat-free environment.
But I want to press on the specific prescription Aman gives here. He emphasizes 10 minutes daily. Is the secret sauce simply the 10 minutes? Or is it the relentless daily consistency?
It's the consistency.
Because human nature suggests we will skip the daily 10 minutes and instead try to cram it all into a massive 2-hour marathon study session on a Sunday afternoon. Does the brain process those two approaches differently?
The neuroscience definitively favors the daily 10 minutes over the Sunday marathon. And it all comes down to how the brain physically builds and fortifies neural pathways. There is a biological process at work here called myelination.
Myelination. Walk me through the mechanics of that.
Okay, every time you practice a skill, an electrical signal travels down a specific neural pathway in your brain. But those pathways can be leaky and slow. Imagine a completely frayed, exposed electrical wire. The current travels through it, but energy escapes, and the signal is weak and inefficient.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
When you repeat a specific action, like speaking an English sentence, cells in your brain called oligodendrocytes begin to wrap a fatty substance called myelin around that neural pathway.
It's literally insulating the wire.
Exactly like wrapping heavy electrical tape around a frayed wire. The myelin sheath prevents the electrical signal from leaking out, allowing it to travel vastly faster and with much greater precision. This is the biological definition of muscle memory.
Wow.
But here is the catch. Myelination is triggered by the frequency of the signal, not necessarily the duration.
Oh, so the brain cares more about how often the wire is used than how long it is used for.
Yes. If you study for 2 hours on a Sunday and then do nothing for 6 days, the brain views that massive burst of activity as a strange anomaly. It does not warrant the biological investment of laying down myelin.
Because it thinks you're never going to do it again.
Right. But if you fire that pathway for just 10 minutes every single day, the brain receives a clear, consistent message. This specific electrical pathway is an essential daily requirement for survival. We must optimize it. It triggers the myelination process.
So those 10 minutes of feeling slightly ridiculous talking to a mirror are not just psychological practice. You are physically, biologically rewiring the insulation of your brain to accommodate the speed of a new language. Consistency literally builds the infrastructure of fluency.
It is the steady, daily drip that reshapes the neurological landscape.
Eventually, though, the shadowboxing has to end. You have insulated the wires, you have practiced the posture, you have starved the translation reflex, but eventually you have to open the bathroom door, step out into the world, and actually speak to another human being.
Yes, you do.
And when you step into the ring, no matter how much you are prepared, you have to be ready for the inevitable moment when the panic spikes and your mind goes entirely blank.
It is an unavoidable part of the process. The system will occasionally crash.
Which is the exact reality Aman and Ria address in the final phase of their guide. They pivot from the theoretical mechanics into practical, real-life application. They know the freeze is coming, so they suggest starting with the lowest stakes interactions possible.
Keep it simple.
Right. Aman says, imagine you are meeting someone entirely new. Instead of reverting to the safety of silence, force yourself to use incredibly basic, predictable scripts. Things like, "Hi, nice to meet you," or "Where are you from?"
Ria emphasizes that relying on these simple conversations is how confidence is slowly constructed in the real world.
They are providing stepping stones. When you are terrified of deep water, you do not immediately jump into the deep end and attempt to debate complex geopolitics.
No, you stay in the shallows.
You stay in the shallows. You rely on highly predictable transactional scripts where you already know the expected answers. It reduces the cognitive load while still allowing you to practice the physical act of engaging with a human being. But the truly invaluable part of their real-world advice is how they address the internal panic. To combat the moments when the brain freezes, they offer a series of specific mantras to keep actively running in your mind.
The mantras are great.
Yeah, phrases like, "Let me try," "I am improving every day," "I am not afraid of mistakes." And Ria's personal favorite, "Confidence comes with practice."
We need to analyze these mantras beyond their surface-level motivational value. They are not just positive thinking fluff.
No.
No. From the perspective of cognitive behavioral psychology, these phrases function as critical psychological anchors or cognitive circuit breakers.
Circuit breakers, meaning they interrupt a process that is overloading.
Exactly. Imagine you're in a live conversation, you lose your train of thought, and the freeze happens. Instantly, an internal narrative of catastrophic panic begins to loop in your mind. I look incredibly stupid. They are judging my intelligence. I need to find an excuse to leave this conversation immediately.
And I know that loop very well.
That panicked internal monologue acts like a massive computer virus, consuming 100% of your available working memory.
Leaving absolutely zero mental RAM available to actually search for the English vocabulary word you originally needed.
Precisely. You cannot retrieve the word because your brain is entirely occupied with managing the panic of not having the word. A pre-rehearsed mantra like "let me try" or "I am improving every day" acts as a cognitive circuit breaker.
Oh, I see.
When you force yourself to repeat it, it forcefully interrupts the looping panic narrative. It replaces the catastrophic fear with a grounded statement of self-compassion and realistic expectation. It forcefully reminds your amygdala, I am a learner. Making mistakes is the defined parameter of learning. There is no actual danger here.
It gives you immediate psychological permission to be exactly where you are in the learning curve rather than where your ego wishes you were.
Yes, and by shutting down the panic loop, it instantly frees up the working memory you were wasting on fear, allowing your brain to redirect that processing power back to the task of finding the vocabulary.
What I find so compelling about this material is not just the tactical advice, but how Aman and Ria choose to deliver it at the very end. They do not just hand down these circuit-breaking mantras from the mountaintop of their own fluency. They actually get incredibly vulnerable.
Yes, that's a beautiful moment.
It really is. In the closing moments of their audio, Aman asks Ria if she can remember the very first time she had to speak English publicly. She laughs at the memory and openly admits she was so paralyzed by nerves that she completely forgot even the most basic, simple words.
She went totally blank.
And Aman immediately jumps in to validate her, saying, "Same here. Everyone feels incredibly nervous in the beginning."
That moment of vulnerability is a masterclass in normalizing the learning curve.
I find the irony of it so delightful. Here you have two creators who have built a comprehensive guide, literally titled The Art of Speaking English with Confidence, and their climactic concluding argument relies on openly confessing their own past, humiliating failures.
That irony is highly intentional, and it is pedagogically vital. When experts present themselves as flawless, innate talents who simply glided into fluency, they inadvertently reinforce the exact perfection trap we dismantled at the beginning of this deep dive.
Yeah.
The struggling learner looks at the flawless expert and thinks, well, they are confident because they have never made a fool of themselves. I constantly make a fool of myself, therefore I possess a fatal flaw and can never achieve that confidence.
The gap between the beginner and the expert feels entirely unbridgeable.
But by intentionally sharing their own early failures, Aman and Ria completely shattered the illusion of innate perfection. Hearing the established authorities confess to forgetting basic vocabulary demystifies the entire journey.
It shifts the perspective completely. Knowing that the experts messed up just as badly as you do doesn't just give you permission to be imperfect. It provides a highly realistic, incredibly relieving roadmap.
It does.
It proves that stumbling, going blank, and feeling the burn of embarrassment are not signs that you are failing the process. They are the exact, mandatory checkpoints you must pass through to achieve fluency.
Absolutely.
Aman and Ria are effectively looking at the learner and saying, the bridge to the confidence we have now is built entirely out of the embarrassment you are trying so hard to avoid today.
It profoundly reframes the linguistic mistake. It is no longer a tragedy to be avoided, it is a necessary milestone to be celebrated.
Let's pull all these threads together to view the complete architecture of what Aman and Ria have built here. We began by confronting the adult ego, the defensive mechanism that demands perfection and prefers silence over the vulnerability of sounding like a beginner.
We dismantled the fluency illusion, recognizing that the desperate urge to rush only leads to cognitive crashes, and that leaning into the pause is actually a powerful sociolinguistic indicator of authority.
We tackled the exhausting internal bottleneck of translation, exploring how to starve the old neural pathways by forcing our internal narrator to transact directly in simple English.
Right.
We dove into the deep evolutionary biology of body language, uncovering how physically forcing a smile and pulling back the shoulders can not only signal safety to the listener, but literally re-engineer our own brain chemistry to lower stress.
And we grounded all of those theories in the physiological reality of myelination. We saw how 10 minutes a day of shadowboxing in front of a mirror builds the insulated neural circuitry required for speed, while arming ourselves with mantras to break the panic loops when we finally step into real-world interactions.
It is an incredibly robust, holistic toolkit. But the true emotional resonance of this deep dive is captured perfectly in Aman and Ria's final, concluding thoughts. Ria speaks directly to the core fear of the learner, saying, "Your voice matters. Do not stay silent just because your English is not perfect."
And Aman follows that with what I believe is the ultimate paradigm-shifting takeaway of the entire guide. People remember confidence more than grammar.
That statement cuts through all the academic noise. Grammar is simply the agreed-upon set of mechanical rules for the vehicle. Confidence is the human energy driving it. If the energy behind the words is genuine, if the desire to connect is authentic, human beings will happily overlook a few dents and scratches on the vehicle.
The connection is the only metric that truly matters. You do not need flawless execution to be heard. You only need the courage to speak.
People remember confidence more than grammar. It completely redefines the goalposts of interaction. You are no longer trying to prove you are flawless. You are simply trying to prove you are present.
And the willingness to be present, to willingly stumble in front of someone and try again, is perhaps the most universally respected trait in any cross-cultural interaction.
Which brings our exploration of Aman and Ria's insights to a close today. We have spent an enormous amount of time dissecting the intricate psychological and biological mechanics of learning a language. But that final realization leaves me with a thought that extends far beyond vocabulary and syntax. Well, if confidence truly is a universal language, if human beings genuinely remember your raw willingness to try far more than your technical execution of the rules, it makes you wonder, in what other areas of your life are you currently choosing the safety of silence, sitting on the sidelines of your own potential, simply because you are waiting until you are perfect enough to finally speak up?